última mesa de este seminario interesantísimo dedicado a la memoria del colonialismo y al impacto en los distintos territorios desde América, África y específicamente España, Cataluña y Barcelona. Y en esta mesa ya última sí hablaremos específicamente de uno de los símbolos de la ciudad de Barcelona, uno de los símbolos que ha identificado desde hace más de 100 años a esta ciudad en su skyline, en su territorio, en su referencialidad, y que hoy, desde hace ya años, está muy contestado, forma parte del debate público de esta ciudad, y que tras años de debate no solo en referencia a Colón, sino a otros símbolos de esta ciudad, empieza a ser un tema candente. Nos acompañan para trabajar y valorar y reflexionar en torno al monumento a Colón, nos acompañan Stéphane Michonneau, nos acompaña José Mansilla y Laida Memba. Daremos paso a las distintas intervenciones y sobre todo daremos lugar y tiempo para el debate. Esperemos que nos aportéis muchísimas preguntas, muchísimas ideas, porque el debate está aquí, está abierto. ¿Qué hacer con este objeto simbólico de contundencia, de referencia casi universal o global como mínimo? Y ahora oigo la traducción, perdón. De acuerdo. Y seguro estos expertos nos aportarán distintas perspectivas desde distintos mundos disciplinares sobre esta problemática. Bien, damos paso a Laida Memba. Ella es arquitecta por la Universidad Politécnica de Cataluña y
by the Polytechnic University of Barcelona and master by the University of Illinois. She's been a professor of the architecture of La Salle and professor of design. She's a doctor in the Department of Theory and History of Architecture in the School of Barcelona, and since 2010 she's the director of the project highlighting the value of the architectonic heritage of Equatorial Guinea. The title is Patrimony and Conflict, the Life Vestiges of the Colonial Barcelona. So Aida, you have the floor. I would like to share the screen first. I will read, therefore we can adjust better to the time. The city of Barcelona, as many other cities, is the result of overlapping of different layers, physical events, memories, and the moment has come that at least we have layers which are part of this complex reality of our society and city, and we can separate them and highlight them. The colonial Barcelona is one of them, and we also have the opportunity to understand the interrelationship with the case of colonialism. Barcelona was one of the cities that more capital received from the Americas, the Indianos, so it's quite visible. Many of the inequalities that we experiment nowadays are also structural inequalities, and we can find the root in episodes such as colonialism. The privilege is generation after generation, but as Professor Josep Fontana was saying, the historian has to contribute to explain the real problems of men and women before and today. As an architect, besides the analysis of architecture and the historical contextualization in order to understand why of the built piece of architecture and urbanism can immortalize the way of thinking of a group, and they record several events, some of them important and other less important. But this is a footprint, maybe not figurative, which cannot be erased as time goes by. For example, modernism in Barcelona is a symbol and has been something exploited by the city. In the school, children learn that modernism, it's an artistic trend linked to industrialization and the bourgeoisie, but this trend is also related to the origin of this movement. The heritage has to be explained within the whole of its context, and this is the fact that can enter into the conflict of heritage. The symbolism changes and it causes some question marks. Whether we're talking about built spaces, spaces of memory, they have to be explained by incorporating all the visions of the several actors of history. History has a historical context of the moment and also a current moment, and both moments usually collide. So we need maybe minimum understanding between both narrations in order to explain history from our present perspective. Let's take as an example Joan Way and Ferrer, who at the beginning of the 19th century went to Cuba and he created the business of importing and exporting. He created a monopoly of the market, creating a fortune related to slaves traffic. Together with his members, he founded the Barceloneta. In 1841, it became Tools and Company. It was dedicated to iron production and heavy machinery for the textile industry. 1855, together with the Valentine's Espero Giral workshops for maritime machinery. 1855, dedicated to the construction of heavy machinery and infrastructures, participating in works of reference to the architecture, such as the Market of Sant Antoni, of the architect Antoni Rovira i Trias, or the Market of Born of Josep Fonsere, two icons of the iron architecture of Barcelona, the city of Barcelona. Eusebi Güell, part of the heritage came from his father, investing part of this fortune in the commissions to Gaudí. The heritage accumulated by the Güell family in Barcelona, it's a footprint in Barcelona, the Royal Monastery of Pedralbes, the Güell House, Castanyer, Palau Moja, and Park Güell. As you can see in the image, this is an image of the Palau Güell and the same. The materialization of the Eixample of Barcelona cannot be explained without colonialism, as several historians point to, such as the War of 10 Years of Cuba, which the flee of capitals from the island. Many well-known buildings, such as the ones of Familia Güell, are others less known, which are part of the Cerdà colonial heritage. The street called Mallorca, we find the work by Josep Barenys and Gambús, who was also a municipal architect of El Vendrell. 1814 was the property of Josep Pons i Mas, who, as one of his offsprings explained, Josep, together with his two brothers Ignacio and Jaume, migrated to Cuba mid-19th century. He was selling ceramics and other elements for building. When he came back, he bought part of the Eixample in order to build works of art and buildings such as the one of Mallorca Street. But besides the Indianos, it's also worth to point to the heritage of Catalan businessmen in the island of Fernando Po, which are also part of the framework of the wealth coming from colonialism. This is heritage which has not been well studied and, of course, less visible and less tangible. The Agricultural Chamber of Fernando Po, founded in 1906 in Santa Isabel, and it's not by coincidence that the committee created a committee in the city of Barcelona. It was the most important lobbying from a political and trade perspective on the interest of the Spanish Guinea. From Barcelona, they planned different strategies in order to send Fernando Po and other territories which make up the Spanish line within a viable business. The Colón Promenade, 1924, it was the headquarters of the Agricultural Chamber, from which the Journal of the Agricultural Defense of Fernando Po was published, which was called later The Voice by Fernando Po. This building by Enric Mora Bosch came to life in 1911, and it was done over an existing building. At the memory of the project, among others, they justify their reform due to the lack in Barcelona of buildings for trade, industry, and capital, banking. Therefore, what they propose is to change the building of houses into offices. The position of the building was the facade of the city to all the ships coming from overseas, justify the monumentality of the building. Street Comtal number 32 of Barcelona, we also find another building, modernist, 1920, architect César Martínez Irunec, and finished by Josep Domènech Marchang. It was the headquarters of Antonio Pérez López, businessman, one of the company's leader in agriculture and colonial trade at the island of Fernando Po. Antonio Pérez López became the owner of Francisco Pérez and Company in 1875, and he became one of the most important businessmen of cocoa in Barcelona, such as the emperor of cocoa, as Jordi San, the historian, explains. As an anecdote, in this building in 1863, they paid tribute to Alfredo Jones Duan, who was coming from Maximiliano Pitano Jones, who was one of the most important Fernandines, rich with the trade of lands in Guinea. We could talk about many examples of our Barcelona, which apparently up to date don't mention explicitly its colonial history, such as the Casa Elizalde of the modernist architect Emili Sala Cortés, property of the Elizalde family, who became rich in Cuba, the Enrique Sagnier and Villavecchia promoted with capital coming from the Americas, and the hotel or the old headquarters of the General Company of Tobacco of the Philippines, company founded by Antonio López, Marqués de Comillas, and also very honored in Barcelona. And the building is by Josep Oriol Mestras, and now is also part of this hotel. And to conclude, let me removing a statue such as the one of Antonio López or the one of Columbus is relatively simple, but the architecture and the organisms are difficult to demolish because they have another degree of complexity. For me, the most important thing is to take into account how to explain the history of architecture and organisms. It is clear that all these characters are part of our heritage, and we have to know them in order not to have a simplistic vision of history and take into account the minimum aspects, including the plurality of different perspectives. Although some of the colonies, such as Equatorial Guinea, for example, there has been a clear will to approach directly the remains of the colonial patrimony, to destroy part of the colonial patrimony, and to find themselves in a process of a new identity of the state. The colonial past symbolically will be eliminated, and many buildings have been demolished, etc. There is also countries which have been colonized that have carried out this exercise of preservation of the patrimony and heritage, but also of reconstruction of history and memory. Cases well known, such as the island of Gorée in Senegal. Of all these reactions can be interpreted, but what we can highlight is that in most cases they have done it from those who were damaged. So it's high time that from the privilege we can rewrite history and its narration. And as I was saying in one of the roundtables yesterday, the non-privileged ones, the minorities, should actively participate in these processes, because otherwise, if we quote Galeano, until the lions have their own historians, the history of hunting will continue to glorify the hunter. Thank you.
Molt bé, moltíssimes gràcies, Laida, molt interessant.
Thank you very much, Laida, very interesting. And to place the debate about Columbus, which is a specific symbol contingent place at the center of Barcelona, at the nucleus of Barcelona, a monumental symbol. I think it's very important to place the debate from architecture and planning. What is the limit of the Barcelona built from the colonial history, from the metropolis or pseudo-metropolis, which claim this colonial city with the links with the colonies. So this places us in front of a very interesting element that we can recover later on the debate of where do we place the limit of the built object and the built city and the built symbol. Where is the limit of what is uncomfortable from our cities? Where is the limit of the plaza for peace, where Columbus is, or we can reach the Eixample, the Sarriá neighborhood? Could we find other symbols in different spaces and different typologies from architecture, from urban planning, and from art? Well, if you agree, we are going to listen to the second speaker, Jose Mansilla, and she's going to talk about the polysemy, urban polysemy, which is very much related to what's been said until now, and it's going to talk about Colom. Jose Mansilla, doctor in social anthropology, member of the Observatory of Urban Conflict and the group of ethnography of public spaces, and he's part of the research group on exclusion and social control of the University of Barcelona. He's now a professor at the Department of Social Sciences and Communication of the University School of Tourism of the University of Lleida, associate professor at the Faculty of Social Education and Social Work of the Ramon Llull University, and professor of the Open University of Catalonia. Jose, you have the floor. Hello, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the invitation. The truth is that I thought it's quite interesting, our participation, Laida, and also this that you have said, because I think that part of the things that she has commented and also Enrique are interesting in order to start my intervention. As you have introduced me, I'm an anthropologist, and I'm very interested about what happens in the street. And what happens in the street is very diverse, and it has many nuances. It's quite rich. And one of the things which is part of this wealth is the symbolic character of the moment that brings us here. I would like to start by an anecdote, because when you asked me to participate at the beginning of September in this round table, I remember, a comic, what we call TVO here, that I was reading when I was a child, which was at the moment Super Lopez from Seville, and Super Lopez acting in Barcelona was of the same level of exotism, such as the one of the metropolis, but with a couple of thousands kilometers away. But I remember very well, and this is part of my memory, of my remembrance, I remember one of these comics of Super Lopez dedicated to Super Lopez, who ends up being a movie director with a very bad script. And in order to finance the movie, he ends up traveling, flying through the Atlantic, and he reaches the US. And in the US, he tries to look for a product producer, and he says, I'm Super Lopez, I live in Barcelona, and I have written a script, and I would like you to finance the script. And this producer from Hollywood tells him no. And he has listened terrible things about Barcelona, Catalonia, and Spain. It's a very laid-back place. It's almost like Africa. And he doesn't see any future in financing a movie by Super Lopez in that city. And he says, no, no, what are you talking about? We are a modern city. And we have hamburgers, we have many things, and we even have a statue of Christopher Columbus. And this is what I wanted to tell you. So the movie producers say, do you have a statue of Christopher Columbus pointing to America? No, he's pointing to the other side. And this is the beginning of my presentation in order to characterize the contradictions or the conflicts, and also what are the special characteristics of this debate about the figure of Christopher Columbus because of what it means from the perspective of an event generating conflict among the neighbors of the city of Barcelona in this case, and due to its contradictions, but also for what we wanted to say before. The monument of Columbus used to be a sign of modernity, a benchmark of the city of Barcelona, and it goes to the point that even the character of a comic projects this monument with these characteristics. In this sense, I would like, before talking about how the feelings of the city have evolved, or what does it mean, for example, that a city such as Barcelona has a statue of Christopher Columbus, I would like to define what do we understand when we talk about symbols, because I really like one of the authors, Victor Turner, who has a book called The Jungle of Symbols, where he uses all these concepts of rituals and moments and spaces where the participants and rituals are found in one phase and another, in an intermediate phase. And he says that the symbols, and I'm going to read it because I have it here, he says that the symbols have three main characteristics. The first characteristic is that they're able to contain in just one element a number of things. Columbus, in this case, as a statue, as a monument, condensates in itself different factors and different characteristics. We can use many adjectives, and depending also on the group of people who consider this monument. The second characteristic that Turner gives to the symbol is that it has the potentiality to include many meanings. And this is related to what we have said before. Just one element that can mean many different things. And above all, this can also mean different questions, and this could be related to ideas and phenomena which are completely different. It can mean, for example, something important, or colonialism, and they don't have to be mutually excluding, or can mean also the colonial past of a city, or make some groups of the population feel a certain offense. And this is what my colleague was mentioning before. And thirdly, Turner said that symbols in general present a polarization of feelings. So they can even have a certain bipolarity. On the one hand, a sensorial one, which is the pole which is manifested and we are able to learn due to our senses, and the other one, ideological one, and how through this capacity to influence our senses as part of the symbols, how through this sensoriality we introduce a series of ideological elements within our own being. So more or less this is the definition made by Turner, which I say is triple, it's quite complex, but it's also, well, at least it's not related to what people usually call symbols. So Columbus and the presence of it in the street, such as the Plaza de la Pau, as it has been said before, it gathers all the elements and it can fulfill all these characteristics because this is an element condensating many options. It can also mean different elements under, well, different things under one single idea, and it counts on the sensorial pole, which is precisely its magnificence, its aesthetics, its design, that we will detail of an ideological pole, which is and can be discussed, but it's the one that we look with the symbol. The symbol, when it is created, it wants to communicate a series of questions, and it generates another one from an ideological perspective. And this is the one that we are debating in this table. I would like to say that when this statue of Columbus is inaugurated, we're talking about the Universal Exposition of Barcelona, number 9, 1898. I think that one of my colleagues is going to dwell about this, but it's, and we have to remember that Barcelona is celebrating the 9th Universal Exhibition of the history of humanity since we have had. The first one is in London, 1851, another one in Paris, in Philadelphia, Melbourne, I think, is where we had a second one, and other cities. And it's also taking place in Barcelona. And it could be a minor element, but it's also very significant because to celebrate a universal exhibition is not just a call where we show the latest technological improvements or industrial advances, which is the aim of these exhibitions, but also to show the power of the social class which is governing the city. The Universal Exhibition of Barcelona is taking place here, not in Madrid or the Basque Country or in any other places of the state, because what the Catalan bourgeoisie does is to say, we are different, we bet in favor of an idea of modernity, and we want to make it clear through the power manifested by our own social class. So more or less, this is what we want to show with the celebration of Universal Exhibition number 9, celebrated all over the world before Rome, Berlin, or any other city, which can call our attention, uh, welcoming an industrial development or capitalist development than the city of Barcelona. So when the people in charge of the elites of Barcelona start the design or the idea of building a monument to Columbus, they are not thinking so much in the idea of a religious idea or discovery idea, which has been translated often and related to the figure of Columbus through history. But what they want to communicate with this symbol is the power of precisely the Catalan bourgeoisie as a social class in charge of the city.
What they try to convey with the figure of Cristobal Columbus has to do with the individual values of what we call today the entrepreneurs. They consider themselves as those who are here to modernize the city, Barcelona, Catalonia, and other parts of the state, and they showcased Cristobal Columbus. That's what he illustrates, a person who convinces, according to the classic historiography, the kings of the era, to fund an expedition with 3 boats, with 3 caravels to cross the Atlantic, to get to the Indias, believing that the world was flat, and to get to the West Indies quicker than the Portuguese in a pathway that ended up in the discovery of America and the Spanish Empire. So the Cristobal Columbus represents the class power of the Catalan bourgeoisie. And actually, I have written it down somewhere here, the commission that was put together to get funds to put in place the monument. Well, there's the representation of the conservative power, politicians, decision makers. We're speaking about a very, I think there's a colleague who will speak about the topic more in depth. We're speaking about conservative politicians, industrial representative bankers, and some artists. So the cultural elite and the economic elite of the city back then. So the idea that they wanted to broadcast, this whole idea of a modern city, a city that somehow is led by free man and modern man. So this whole idea is also seen in the very design of the monument to Christopher Columbus. And the moment it was built, it was a technical marvel. Today, we look at it like if it was nothing, but when it was built, 60 meters, and with the materials, the elevator, etc., it was like a modern highlight, to be honest. Could be considered some sort of achievement for the era. We need to take into account that we're speaking about a moment when technical developments were monumental. For example, the Eiffel Tower is one of the clear examples of how the technique was evolving in this period. So the monument that somehow symbolizes modernity for this social group that aim at exhibit this monument in the public space in the city, public space, so that, according to Turner's definition, so that with their aesthetic, with what they could generate, well, they wanted to convey a certain ideology, which is the ideology of the Catalan bourgeoisie of the era. And this has a very short pathway because a little bit after, at the beginning of the 19th and at the beginning of the 20th century, Catalonia in general and Barcelona as the Catalan capital starts a renovation process, a values renovation at all levels, cultural, artistic, etc., and starts understanding itself. Well, we're speaking about the resurgence of the Catalan political nationalism, and Barcelona starts looking at itself not from a modern perspective, but rather from a human rights based city. The city wants to drink from the past values, and from there on, there is a reconstruction of the Gothic neighborhood. So, this whole idea of recovering certain architectonic aesthetic. For sure, Laia is going to know much more than I, and Puig Cadafalch was a referent of this element, like the development of the traditional Catalan building and the invention of the Gothic district. It didn't exist back then because the new nationalist elites wanted to build a past, a symbolic past, to make a clear difference between them and the Spaniards, right? And to somehow showcase the values that were modern from their perspective and from their social class, and which was not modernity anymore, as it has been said before. So this didn't last very long, right? That's why I wanted to speak about the polysemantic element of the history we're dealing with here, because this whole idea that the monument to Christopher Columbus wants to broadcast, or at least the ideologist's idea, didn't last very long. It disappeared immediately from the public opinion or from the common sense, if you want to see it from a more hegemonic perspective, and it became démodé, old-fashioned, even if later on it was rediscovered when it comes to celebrating certain days, right? But very interesting things have happened. It has been neglected from a political perspective. The monument has been neglected from a political perspective, but it ended up being related to the Barcelona skyline and, more importantly, to the tourism reference. So much so that a society that was created in 1908, which is the Society for Attiring Tourists, which is a form of, well, it's a PPP to launch an initiative. It was a very Catalan thing to do related to the tourism sector. So they wanted to attract foreigners to Barcelona. It was a lobby to, well, it's a private public partnership that aims at attracting tourists through marketing campaigns to attract visitors to the city. Back then, they were called foreigners and not tourists, but they were mainly tourists. And this is related to the end of the Spanish possessions in Cuba, the loss of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, because many of the capitals that were repatriated from Cuba to Catalonia and Barcelona were free, and tourism seemed to be a new opportunity to put them at work. So this society for attracting foreigners started Christopher Columbus monument in many of the marketing campaigns and leaflets that, well, yeah. So even if from a political perspective, Columbus did not have the same meaning than it had had at the beginning, there's like a new start. The monument starts belonging in a very private way to the history and the form of the city. And this gets all the way to today, right? Because if you go for a walk, and I even tell my students, write down this in Google because Google tells you many things. Google is horrible, but also it's cool. And one of the cool parts, if that, it allows you to come up with common sense thanks to the algorithms. So if you Google something, if you look for news in Google, well, Google helps you understand what's mainstream, what Google wants you to think about a certain element. So if you say Skyline Barcelona, if you Google Skyline Barcelona or Barcelona profile, and you will have an image with the Akbar Tower, the Sagrada Familia, and oftentimes you see, I don't know how to put it, part of the Montjuic mountain, and oftentimes you see the monument, the Colón monument, which is strictly related to the physiognomy of the city. So today, and of course, here's another reference to the polysemantic way, right? Today, Cologne is not an entrepreneur. Today, is not related to a modern city connected to the world, connected to the rest of Spain, a modern city based on entrepreneurship. No, today the Monument to Cologne is an element that is just related to Barcelona. People remember Barcelona thanks to the monument in some cases. So it's an example of what Barcelona wants to convey to foreigners, tourists, visitors, and its own citizens. So in this sense, very interesting to see how the situation in the last few years, all the claims against the monument, of course, Aida has already referred to the point. It's very easy to get rid of a statue like Antonio Lopez, but it's a little bit more difficult to get rid of a monument to Colón, especially if it's 60 meters tall. It's not easy, and we all know that. Not to speak about hotels that are also part of the skyline oftentimes. So the whole debate about the role that Barcelona had during colonialism, the American and the Asian colonialism, well, we still have important rests of this colonialism, even in the city, even in the squares. So Cologne, all of a sudden, has reached an important role due to this topic, right? So today, Columbus is not anymore the modern man, etc. Now, going back to the sensorial element, he is a symbol of an oppressor. He is a symbol of a horror that started 500 years ago. So here we have to understand this turn, this new turn on symbolism. So the image of Columbus, depending on which social group you belong to, will have one meaning or another. And it's also important to understand that monuments fight in the public space, but not in the public space understood as the forum of ideas, but rather from a political perspective to impose their vision of what they mean, of what the values they push forward. So, of course, there's conflict that we need to speak about. Conflict is inherent to cities, to life in cities, and in this case, within the ideological sphere, of course, it has a physical translation, and see what we have to do with the monument, with an homage to Colón that means one thing for some social classes, but the opposite to other neighbors. So this is pretty interesting, isn't it? and this needs to be taken into account. So these theaters, this polysemantic element allows us to reflect about conflict and the need to take decisions in this regard. And this is what Núria was speaking about. And this is the main element in the debate. We'll have to take a position about what we would have to do if it was us who could take decisions about what to do with the monument in the future. And I think I'm going to leave it here. Thank you very much.
De acuerdo, perfecto. Muchas gracias, José. Muy interesante.
Thank you very much, José. Very interesting presentation. A very interesting contribution. I've listed a long list of questions. How do we manage conflict? It would be about time, right? We have some time now for discussing about conflict, because the conflict is there, parameters are clear. Now we are clear about your perspectives and Stéphane Michonneau's perspective, who we're going to listen very soon. And it will be very interesting to see how to manage this conflict. Oriol Lopez, in the first session, said that it's not a conflict that is going to vanish in 2 or 3 years. We're speaking about decades of conflict, and it affects cities, it affects stakeholders, citizens. So it's about time to start reflecting on the topic, and this workshop ends at opening a debate, opening a reflection on the topic. But of course, this will be only a start, and for sure we'll have to keep reflecting for many more years. So the polysemantic element will have to be dealt with, absolutely. But this is not only an element that happens at the beginning when, well, symbols are polysemic generators, but time imposes meanings. And this is, of course, important, this boredom with symbols that our colleagues speak about, right? Our colleagues, our American colleagues, our African colleagues, the epistemology towards the West. I believe that this is a very interesting layer of meaning, a very true layer of meaning, before a lot has been said regarding truth. So I believe that absolutely we need to understand conflict as something positive. Before giving the floor to Stéphane Michonneau to listen to his contributions, I would like to share a couple of points. One is a little bit more serious than the other. When you were speaking about modernity, you said, oh, this is the parameter that Mendoza uses in his book, The City of Prodige, this marvelous idea in collaboration with Europe. Europe and Barcelona intermingled. And I always think that 1 year after, there's the Eiffel Tower that was built. 1 year after the book was published in Barcelona, we try to be modern because, of course, from a technological perspective, the monument to Cologne is a clear technological development. But 1 year after, only the Eiffel Tower was built. And of course, this is another level, right? Or at least another universe. And I believe that it would be interesting to compare both. And now, to close, I believe that some artists say that all symbolic synthesis is in his finger. When, yeah, all the synthesis, all the symbolic synthesis is in the finger, and this is contradictory because it points towards the opposite direction, not to America. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Stéphane Michonneau, who the title is The Monument to Cologne Between Memory and Heritage, the Party of History. Let me introduce Stéphane Michonneau. He's professor. He was also a professor in Poitiers University and director of the Velázquez House in Madrid. He's a specialist in Spanish history, and he's devoted the majority of his work to the study between of the topic between relationship and amongst his publishings, we could underline Barcelona Memory Identity, which marked a milestone in the city, Sombras de Mayo, Imaginaries and Representations of Spain during the Franco period, and it was yesterday, Belchite Peoples in front the past. Stéphane, the floor is yours. Thank you. Hi, can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Great. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers. I am very happy to have the opportunity to participate in this very interesting panel discussion. I will be speaking in Spanish because I think it's going to be easier. I'm sorry. I don't know if the book that you mentioned, Núria, really marked a milestone. Back then, no one would read it, and everyone was like, oh, this is pointless. The history of these whole things, well, for 15 years, I haven't worked on the topic, so I'm going to probably insist on things that have already been said in the past by myself. If I understood the topic correctly, because I don't live in Barcelona anymore, the monument to Cologne today is an object of debate, and it seems like there are two opposite poles that structure the debate. On the one hand, there's the public opinion, which is scandalized by the values that the monument incarnates and is asking for the memorial resignification, but there's also part of the public opinion that is asking to respect the monument as it could be considered an item that has deeply defined the Barcelona's profile, as Jose said. So ones are for, ones are against. So in these two poles, I suggest a third pathway because I'm an historian and I believe that there's another party, which is the party of history. I don't think we need more memory, we need more history. That's what I believe, at least. At least three histories. First, there's the history of the different political and symbolic investments that the monument represented throughout its life. The second history would be the history of the constitution of the myth of the America discovery, which is extremely related to the celebration of October the 12th. And last, one could speak about the patrimonialization of the monument of Barcelona, as Jose mentioned. I am going to perhaps insist a little bit on that. So, as for symbolic investments, the monument has known very different symbolic contents, and I believe that the monument to Colón in Barcelona is a result of a long-lasting decimononic liberal tradition that would interpret Colón's destiny as the hero that would be capable of fighting the preconceived ideas of his times and imposing himself due to his will. He was a liberal hero and he incarnated individual freedom, and that's why he was extremely successful at the end of the 19th century, not to speak about the Columbine myth, which was there before the monument. So if you agree, I will share my screen, if you allow. Can I do that? Yeah, I can do that. Perfect. I'd like to share some interesting figures, such as the amount of items or monuments devoted to Columbus, Spain, France, and Portugal. There was an important increase during Romanticism and liberalism after the 30s and 40s. And then, of course, there was an important peak during the 4th century, then a clear lack of interest for Cologne at the beginning of the 20th century. And this one is pretty interesting. This small peak during the 40s and 30s, and then another peak when the centenary was about to be celebrated. The homage to Columbus started during the 20s, during the 30s, and then it culminated during the 19th century, during the 4th centenary. Another important element that I would like to say is the following. During the development of nationalisms, Columbus played a key role in the development of Spanish nationalism. And here we have an important debate during the 19th century, debate which is totally absurd today, perhaps, but which was extremely important back then. and that is the matter of his origins. In many debates, in many discussions, the origin was key. It was about turning Columbus Spanish. So many readings, well, there were arguments according to which he was Jewish, Catalan, Italian, all sorts of opinions. But of course, this is a central role and a central debate about the development of Spanish nationalism. Columbus project is a project that at the beginning in Barcelona, so during the 40s, 1840, well, the monument was extremely related to a monarchic element. Columbus was linked to the tribute to Fernando the Catholic. That's why in the central square there is no monument to Fernando the Catholic. The project was there in Plaza Real in Barcelona. That's why the street going from the Ramblas to Plaza Real is called Colón. That's why Victor Balaguer's work make things change, and Balaguer reinterprets Colón more as a celebration of the Catalan imperialism. And I believe this is a very important change because the Barcelona-based Columbus loses the monarchic nuance that still has in other parts of Spain. Catalan imperialism, which in Balaguer's work had been both Mediterranean and Atlantic, the Mediterranean empire of the Middle Age. Well, Balaguer says that Barcelona is a natural harbor of the Spanish marine or sea adventures, and Columbus is promoted in this sense, in this very imperialistic sense. That's why the finger is so important, because the finger is meant to point towards the Atlantic, but of course, as you said very wisely, the finger also is pointing towards the Mediterranean, the old dream of the Catalan imperialism. So it should also be said that the monument to Columbus, as you can see in this picture, when it was inaugurated, the monument to Columbus is part of many other monuments raised by Catalan and Spanish imperialism, as the monument to Ferran Garran Marquez, the monument to Africa, which was never built in Tetuan Square in 1960, the monument to Prim, the homages to Güell and Lopez during the 80s, and so on and so forth. Even the monument to the soldiers fallen in Cuba, a monument which was totally unknown and that can still be found in Las Corts. So it's a pack of imperialist monuments, and Columbus monument is only one. Probably it's the most important one, but not the only one. As for the political content, well, I would say that it's very simple. It's the message of the bourgeois elites from the end of, it's a very liberal and provincial approach of history. Catalonia is the political engine and economic engine. It's a very interesting and like interpretation. It's a difference, right? It's a very interesting thing. It's like Catalonia is the modern country of Europe, and here is the political project of the elites of the time, this sort of Catalanization of Spain, a project that, as you might know, failed. The interesting part here is that the message was quickly left in a vacuum, because 4 years after, during the celebration of the 4th centenary, the content changes radically. The content is monarchic and religious. So the monument is abandoned. Barcelona's monument is abandoned because it means nothing. Then we get all the way to the 90s, and it becomes criticized by the modernist cultural movement, and then the Catalanists that impose their own monumental apparatus in Barcelona, and they don't know what to do with Columbus. So they end up abandoning the monument to Christopher Columbus. So it ends up becoming a vacuum in the ground. It's a total political failure. It's also very interesting to say here that if, well, Columbus might, well, it will probably have one last avatar at the beginning of 1910. In 1911, the day of the race was celebrated under Columbus monument. This is some sort of political rebirth with a very different meaning, with a very Spanish meaning, and that's why the monument was very successful during Primo de Rivera's dictatorship, and that's why it was well, it's a monument that has had many different symbolic contents, and as Jose said before, it's a very polysemic monument. It's very plastic. As in many other cases in Barcelona. Then there's a second story that I would like to speak about, which has to do with the history of the constitution of the myth of the discovery to America, and the homage to Columbus reflects about a memorial Euro-American world. And I believe that, well, this has already been said. The first monuments to Columbus in the world were built in America, were raised in America. Here to your left, the monument to Columbus in Baltimore, and the majority of monuments were raised in the US. So it's basically the US that pays tribute to Columbus at the end of the 18th century. In Latin America, here's a symbol of the Italian participation to Italy and America, the development of the individualistic values, etc. I cannot get in detail, but it's clear that in the world and in America, there was a certain Columbine passion during the 19th century, and there you can see the different dots where we have monuments to Columbus, the red ones before 1868 and the green ones afterwards. So, as you can see in the US, there is an important concentration of monuments, also Cuba and all around. So this American cult reaches Europe a little bit later. One of the first images of Columbus in Europe is a small profiling of Columbus 1837, and later in Europe it was developed in the 19th century. Finally, there are 20 monuments, very important, in America, and not all of them are related to the life and episodes of Columbus.
El monumento a Barcelona
The monument to Barcelona. Barcelona is number 58 as a monument. So it's quite a late monument. It's the biggest of the world, but I think it's number 58, if I'm not mistaken. In 1888, at the moment of the opening of the monument, there are already 7 monuments to Christopher Columbus in Spain. Here we see them in red, and then after the opening, we will have 8 more. So in Spain, there are many. In Madrid, there are 3 monuments to Christopher Columbus. The most famous one is the one in the Plaza Colom, inaugurated in 1885. This is quite a homogeneous distribution within the Spanish geography, but careful because there are a couple of different interpretations. The one from Barcelona, which will be the one of the imperialism, and also the other interpretation from the rest of Spain, which is more related to content of religion and monarchy. Well, these are quite well-known monuments. There is one in Cartagena, in Madrid, in Valcuevo, Barcelona, Sevilla. All those were previous to the monument of Christopher Columbus in Barcelona. The monument of La Rábida, very interesting. Here we see the cross, a very different political content, the one of Madrid with the cross also, etc., etc. So this is the geographical origin of the subscriptions to the monument of Columbus. The money comes, of course, from Catalonia, but from all over Spain. So it's a national Spanish identity at the moment. I would like to insist on the fact that this myth of Columbus, of the discovery of America, it's a completely shared myth between Europe and America. It's a good example of a transnational aspect of the memory. And the last step I would like to mention, and this is going to be very quickly because Jose has already mentioned that, so I'm not going to insist on it, but the last case will be the case of patrimonialization of the monument of Barcelona. And here the truth is that I don't have a lot of information about this process of how to appropriate this heritage. From the beginning, the monument of Columbus is interesting, as Jose has said, for the people from Barcelona, much more because of the content of modernity than for the imperialist content. It's a political fact, but it's success because it's a figure of modernity, because it's a higher column of Europe. The scaffold, for example, it's so nice that they should make a monument with the scaffolding. So the passion for modernity, and we are 1 year apart from Tour de Eiffel, is the same content and the same reason, modernity, and is the evident proof of the superiority of the Catalan industry. It's the biggest monument of Barcelona, it's the biggest monument of Christopher Columbus all over the world. It's the best of the best. It's very interesting also, and we can see it in this slide, that the monument to Columbus is part of the touristic exhibition of 1888. We have Columbus, we have Passeig Sant Joan, Güell, Rafael Casanova, etc. And here we have López, and finally the whole trajectory of the exhibition, and it's completely integrated within the trajectory of the exhibition of 1888, and it's an immediate success. The monument is like the Tour Eiffel of the local exhibition. It's the equivalent of it. And countless postcards, pictures, reproductions of the monument circulate among the hands of the Society of Barcelona and all over Spain, and it's quickly integrated within the profile of the city, and it becomes like an icon. For example, Arc de Triomphe, glory to Columbus in the middle of the street of Portaferrissa. And postcards also, we have postcards all over the place. These are very bad reproductions, but we have countless postcards. It's the icon, and I can compare it to the Eiffel Tower as the jewel of the exhibition. And finally, the touristic heritage is much more important than the political heritage. That's also very clear. As a summary, I would just like to propose the typical interpretation and reading, second degree, proposing an intellectual distancing. And this monument has gone through many upheavals, and it has to be understood within a global context. At that moment, it's a political failure, but it's a heritage success. So these were the three ideas that I wanted to defend with my presentation. Finally, those who are fans of Columbus and those who are not, both of them, they share the same feeling and belief, which is the power of the image and its symbol. We work in social sciences, and we know that the image has a certain power, but this power changes, and the transmission of meaning is variable, and according to the different periods it can change, and it can be completely controlled without the need to attack the support of the images. So the problem, it's a question of re-signifying the monument, and that's it. Thank you very much. We cannot hear Núria Ricart now because her microphone is off. Thank you very much, Stéphane. It's been very enlightening and very interesting to see all the materials that you have shown and all the explanations and this relaxed, reflective proposal from distance, which is so healthy when we are used to the passion and the conflict, and we like it. Therefore, thank you very much, Stéphane. You were talking during your intervention about several ideas from different perspectives, all of them very interesting, and also this idea that the heritage and the icon that Jose was also mentioning has triumphed over the ideology. The monument is successful as far as its iconologic and symbolic dimension, and also as a benchmark from a town planning point of view, but it has been a failure, a series of failures from an ideological and political perspective. And I was thinking when I was listening to you, when you were talking about this political vocation of the monument, Catalanizing Spain and the Catalan colonialism that the monument has from the contest to the winning memory. It's incredible whatever is exposed by Caeta Boigas in this memory. And it's clearly defending this specific ideology where Catalonia has a certain weight and parameters, and it has several characters surrounding this monument within a second hierarchy, which are very interesting. And they are the ones which are more harmful because they are close to the citizens, close to the tourists, people who can see it, and they see these different categories which are petrified of the indigenous, completely destroy from a symbolic perspective. And I completely agree with you, because of course we have to reflect around symbols. Symbols are just symbols, and we have to provide them with the meaning and power they have, the real one. But when you take a look at the images and the impact they can generate, you also understand that different conflicts arise from an iconoclastic perspective. If you take a closer look to Columbus and its symbology, we see it's quite harmful. Why not? It is true that for decades we have not been able to detect it because, like many monuments, it went unnoticed. But there are several moments, and this is interesting, of history where they are speaking to us once again, and they tell us to re-signify ourselves. Thank you, Jose, for activating your screen. Laida also, we will now listen to the questions from the public. And to present some questions, although many questions have already been presented, but let's go directly to the heart of the subject. You were talking about re-signifying from the distance given by academicism and historiographic discipline, placing things at the right place, and to place also this meaning from the cultural management, from political management. How can we re-signify all this? What are the mechanisms if this is the way forward? I'm asking Laida and Jose and Stéphane, how do we re-signify? Or in the case of Jose and Laida, what would you do if you were Mayoress Colau right now? Jose, Laida, up to you. Well, I was waiting for you to speak first. Well, just to steer a little bit the debate, I think that this question of re-signifying and also monument, how do we re-signify something that for many people means or has a negative nuance? I remember when you were talking about re-signifying, Stéphane, when you were talking about re-signifying the El Caídos Valley. And I remember talking with Paco Randa, who is the anthropologist in charge of the commission of this valley at the Congress, which I follow very closely from the CSIC, that when he was at the Congress and they approved under the government of Zapatero in favor of resignification, but as time went by, he realized that it was not so difficult, it was not so possible, so easy to carry out a resignification of a place such as El Valle de los Caídos, which has such an important charge of meaning for part of the Spanish people. The monument, what happens is that it's much more evident. It's the figure of Christopher Columbus, and the re-signifying cannot opt for eliminating a patrimonial element. It's not re-signifying it an end of discussion. It's not so much based on some type of modification, such as the one that we mentioned with El Valle de los Caídos, but in any case, dynamics of reinterpretation or interpretation of what really happened then, or what it meant for many peoples, the arrival of Columbus and the imperial Spanish development. And I think this is very complicated. I think this is quite complicated because I understand also that there is a certain deception. It's like, okay, we've gone so far, that's okay. And now if I have to encounter this monument on the street, if I were part of the municipality of Barcelona, Ada Colau or whoever, I will uh, steer the debate. I don't want to say, okay, now nobody is going to talk about Black Lives Matter, etc. And now Biden is in power, like fresh blood. Well, fresh blood is not so sure talking about Biden, a different vision of reality and an approach to minorities, not such as the one of Trump. And now we are no longer talking about this, and that's enough. And something similar has happened with this and Christopher Columbus and other questions, which is difficult to recover. So we are talking, but we have not dealt with this again. So if we really want, well, if we re-signify the monument, whether we do it or not, what we want to do is not to lose sight of the possibility of confronting different opinions, because then if there is a debate which is starting, I think that this will create lack of interest for the debate. And I understand that those groups who are confronted with this, they would say, okay, enough, I don't want to talk about this, because every time we talk about this, it seems that we are going to find the solution, but we are not getting anywhere. What I will introduce is a wide debate. There are many ways to do it. So if in a way we are interested in the representation of the city, with special interest of people who see this confrontation, they make visible precisely this. And from there, of course, the politicians will be in charge of the project. That's why we voted for them for 4 years. But that's my opinion. Very well. Thank you very much. Laida, would you like to say anything? Yes, I completely agree. And I think that during these processes or debates, which can be open now, well, I think it's basic and very important to count on other voices. Because as I was saying before, the meaning and the symbolism that it can have at the beginning of the 20th century and the meaning it can have now, we are talking about very different moments. And the context of the people who are living now, the different sensibilities that we have are completely different. Obviously, I'm thinking about the song of El Colacao, which in the 90s was funny for some people, not to all of us. We lived it like a trauma, but now it cannot be accepted. So incorporating then other sensibilities and other voices is so important in order to carry out these processes, because otherwise our vision will be distorted, because it will be done just from one part of the reality, and unless you have lived this experience, it's very difficult to educate this perspective. Thank you very much, Stéphane. Well, I have no opinion about this, really. First of all, because I'm not from Barcelona, so it seems complicated to enter into this. And then, I don't know, I study different policies of memory and activist of memory, and I don't want to participate in these debates, really. Very well. So
fuera del círculo y dentro del círculo a la vez.
You cannot be outside the circle and inside the circle at the same time. And I agree with my colleagues. It's very interesting, this question that you have asked, whether Columbus can be resignified. I think it's very important. And to eliminate the monument of Columbus does not eliminate the colonial past of Spain or the Catalan imperialism, and imperialism which happened during the 19th century, and then the Catalanism continues to exist. It has a very strong imperialistic content. So it's like the core of it. It's something very strong in the political history of Catalonia. So I think that now one has to face its past. And I'm in favor, maybe, well, I don't know, of keeping the monument as a negative monument, a monument which reminds all of us this past. And we have to look at it face to face. I know that it will be easier to eliminate it, but if we erase the monument, we don't erase what has happened. And then another important thing will be maybe to neutralize the political content of the monument. And then, therefore, there are two ways. The historical one, which I think it's a good one, to tell people about the lives of Columbus, because this monument has had many different lives. I think this is fundamental. We have to explain it. And another thing, from the point of view of the policies of memory, maybe we could take advantage of this plaza to make a memorial to slavery. This will be a way of neutralizing a little bit the content of Columbus, or somewhere at the port of Barcelona to add another layer, neutralizing the negative aspect. These are just some recommendations, but I'm not giving my opinion. No, you did give your opinion. It's been recorded, and this will be used against you. You are the ones deciding. It's the municipality deciding. I think there are some questions in the chat. Gerard Llorens says, I completely agree with Stéphane. Well, he's dwelling on this subject of Catalan identity and reverberation of imperialism, which has been mentioned in the previous debate. Very interesting. Well, I think that many ideas have come up, and of course go beyond to what we're used to in Barcelona during this recent decades. We have seen the complete withdrawal of Franco monuments, such as the one monument to the fallen, the one to José Antonio Primo de Rivera, a monument to the Victory, which has not been a complete demolishment because the obelisk has been kept. The vertical typological element has been kept, but it's almost all its symbolic meanings have been erased. And finally, the last great reference in this trajectory of 88, the monument to Columbus, the monument to López and López, mentioned by Laida also. A monument that not so long ago, after a certain and interesting public debate, is partially censored as a strategy of management of the conflict. And this censorship leads us to a pedestal which still signifies the same thing than 10, 15, 100 years ago with all the layers of history, etc. But without this object, the cuspid, which is the reference to López and López, and within a celebration which gather this violent operation, which is iconoclastia. So therefore, in the context of Barcelona, eliminating these objects is this one. As Laida was saying, we are working on symbolic objects which are easier, which are those monuments, more or less sizable, which do not have any consequence of the urban life because architecture is much more complex. And maybe we forget about modernism because we will touch things that we don't want to touch. And during the recent years, the context has been of total or partial elimination with some type of re-signifying through the nomenclature, etc. And now we open the melon of Columbus with all the elements, and not only Columbus, there are thousands of symbolic objects belonging to the Catalan imperialism. Let's see what we do with all of this or what we don't do. Thank you very much for all the contributions. I think it's quite late, 8:08. I give you the floor for closing remarks, and I thank you for your attention.
Celeste nos envía también.
I think Celeste is also sending us a question, which is, do you believe that from the administration they're abusing the term re-signifying? To end, speaking of some type of question, which is intervention of minimums, if this re-signification is beginning to be maybe abuse, and it's also covering too superficial management. Should I answer? I think that yes, maybe in a way we are remaining at the surface. As Stéphane was saying, the monument to Columbus is part of a whole of monuments. There are several architectonic elements and physical elements which also have some symbolism. Some of them are more evident or easier to see, others are more subtle, but they do exist. And in the end, the priority is to deep into these projects and to be able to explain all this heritage and also to contextualize it. And on a day-to-day basis, if you go to a hotel or you go to an exhibition or you go to a specific place, well, this has to be explained. And maybe you don't even see the monument to Columbus, but I think it's a priority. If I have to establish some priorities, I will start maybe by going deep into rewriting history. And now, well, things are the way they are. And the educational system, I think that there are many things that should be done still. Okay, very well. So thank you very much, all of you. And to close this roundtable, let me thank all of you for your presence, your interesting participation in this seminar. And to close the debate and the seminar, I will give the floor to the director of the Observatory who has organized the debate in order for him to close it. Thank you very much, all of you. Well, thank you very much, Núria. Can you hear me? We cannot hide ourselves that from the Eurom, from the big mausoleums and monuments by the Caídos to Pamplona or Madrid, and even the Lopez Lopez. So re-signifying and reconverting the icons, the clear ones, when there is some type of, well, in policies of memory, there is no consensus. Because, of course, memory in a conflict, debate on the conflicts of the past, and consensus is difficult when memory is public, because we're talking about a statue, a monument, a bunker, and that's complicated. But what we could do is with these icons or public spaces, or maybe with artistic spaces, statues and monuments that do have a clear, explicit message that you, the experts, have been explaining. What we are doing is not re-signifying, but reconverting. As Stéphane has said very clearly, that's the option. And I think that it was done in another seminar, but no, there is no emptiness. We cannot create an aseptic space such as the one that was withdrawn from Primo Rivera and others, and to create some emptiness. No, we reconverted into a contemporary space with contemporary values created more or less, but they are the ones of the values of integration, the plural values of our society. As we heard the other day, more than 50% of the people know, and of course there are more people part of this census, and are born not in Catalonia, not in Spain, and this is not Spanish or Catalan discourse, but the discourse is another one. Public space, no. The public space is responding to the old narration of Barcelona, Barcelona people, Catalan people, etc. So what we have to do is to be bold. Of course, public policies, we have many. Of course, it has to go together because this is not for free. Budget from all of you. Thank you very much, because the experts should be integrated in commissions, helping us to turn these monuments, but to reconvert them, not to re-signify them, but to tell them against these values, which are completely anti-democratic, obsolete, against human rights, which are the colonial vows, slavery, etc.
So the message is about making an effort in this sense. Of course, it's going to take an effort. Of course, it's going to be expensive. It requires of a public debate, right wing, left wing, center, political center, sorry. But, you know, new societies will overcome the debate, and it will be these new generations who will put forward proposals to re-signify, to redefine all these spaces for a reflection about what happened in the past and also about societies of the present. And at the end of the day, this requires of a great deal of imagination, political will, public budget, and of course, an in-depth reflection, as well as of a construction process, right? Because memory is a process, a process that started a long time ago. And let me insist on what I said at the beginning, what I said in the introduction, thanks to the team, thanks to the born, thanks to the online experts. We can touch each other, we can't hug each other or have a more heated debate regarding this very timely topic. And thanks to all the participants for those participating from other parts of the world. We'll keep working. We'll keep working on this area, in the debate, in the topic. We will keep working on the uncomfortable memories, not only in Spain or in Catalonia, but all around the world. With the City Council, we'll keep working on the topic. We'll keep working on colonialism, on slavery, because of course this is just one chapter with many, many more. And of course, Núria and many of you listening to us, you've known that for a long time, but we'll keep also interacting in other debates which are, well, we need to stop these monuments. We need to re-signify these monuments, sorry. Thanks, Núria, Ricart, Cell, and all the different speakers. That's it from my side. Thank you very much. I don't know if Angel would like to say something on behalf of the City Council. I can't see you, but here's a screen with names, and the names are clear. So I would like to see your faces beyond. Oh, well, because thank you very much. Thank you very much for these 3 days. It's been very nice. I could follow you the first day and also today. I've taken plenty of notes, so I feel like I have a lot of homework and that we need more budget. And that's what I've taken note of. Absolutely. Thank you very much to everybody, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to have more conferences like this. For sure we will. Thank you very much, Angel, and thanks to the City Council. Thanks to the Department for Historic Memory. Let's keep working, absolutely.
Hem tancat, hola, hem tancat l'streaming, si voleu seguir parlant.
So the streaming